to the Natty Society podcast where we talk everything about natural bodybuilding. I'm your host, Edmund, and joining me is my co-host, Sim.
Hi everyone.
And today we got a very special guest, the first WNBF Pro Men's Bodybuilding from Singapore, Firdauz, right? So yeah, welcome him on our podcast.
Thank you so much, Edwin and Sim. It's an honor, truly, to be here.
All right, Firdaus, right. So first and foremost, congratulations on turning pro, right? Introduce yourself a little bit to the audience.
Sure. Thank you. So, as you've rightly said, I just earned my pro card at WNBF Worlds 2024 in Boston. Prior to that, I just competed in WNBF Singapore a month before. This was my second contest season. My first contest season was in 2018, and that's when I first stepped onto a natural bodybuilding stage. At that point, I'd been training and dieting or eating well seriously for about 8 years. So now it will have been about 14 years. So this physique that gave me pro status has been in the making for 14 years. Uh, Ironically, my formal education is in engineering, so I'm very much like a numbers person, numbers and physics. But I decided to pursue my passion for my career, and I became a personal trainer. So I'm currently a personal trainer at T Squared Lab, and I've been a personal trainer for 6 years. Uh, yeah, just helping other people get in shape and walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Wow, that's a long journey, man. Like that speaks a lot of volume for the time and effort needed to to attain a pro-worthy physique, right? And I think I want to ask you this question, but before that, I want to
Thank
congratulate
you.
you for turning pro, not in any other show, but WNBF Worlds, right?
Thank you so
The
much.
World Championship. So congratulations. And so obviously you've been lifting for 14 years and you turned pro after 14 years of lifting. Um, could you briefly tell us about your journey venturing into your first contest prep season and also your recent return to competing again, right? There's a long time you did not compete, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
six
just break
years.
break that down for us.
Sure, sure. So I started lifting 14 years ago, and back then wasn't with the intention of competing in natural bodybuilding or bodybuilding at all. It was more so just to get in better shape. I was just finishing my A levels at the time, and I was very much a bookworm, not really into exercise at all. And my mother was really worried about me because I was about to enter national service. So, for those of you who don't know, Singaporeans have to serve national service in either the armed forces, police force, or civil defense force, and it's really demanding physically. So, you need to be pretty fit. And I was anything but fit. So, my mom got me to train. And so I would train a lot with my uncle who would bring me to the track and make me run, make me do sit-ups, pull-ups. And one day he brought me to the gym and I just fell in love with it right away. Like the moment I grabbed the barbell, I just loved it and I kept pestering him, when's the next time we're gonna go to the gym? And I just got bit by that bug and I've been loving it ever since. And then I think it's about 4 years into it, I started university. And in university, I started meeting competitive natural bodybuilders. At that time, there was no natural bodybuilding competitions in Singapore, so they were competing in non-tested competitions organized by currently it's called FML, Fitness Movement League. I can't remember what it was called back in the day, but they would compete in competitions like Muscle War, Nationals, which all of which are non-tested. But because I was mixing with those people, I was highly encouraged to stay natural. And these people were kind of telling me, stay natural, don't use any performance enhancing drugs. And I think there will come a point in every lifter's journey where they will be curious about it. But fortunately for me, I was hanging around people who helped to shift the focus to how do we optimize training? How do we optimize our nutrition? How do we optimize our lifestyles? And I was seeing that they were achieving really great things with their physiques. So I was thinking to myself, I'm just going to hold off a bit longer. And they also got me to think about competition. So I was thinking to myself, I'm gonna step on stage, and throughout my candidature at university, it was all non-tested competitions. I was planning to jump into Muscle War Nationals, and in my final year of university, I decided to sign up with 3DMJ, specifically Jeff Alberts. He's my coach, and he prepped me. And fortunately for me, a natural federation had just opened up. It was called NBFA, and there was a competition in 2017, which I watched. And again, I was really inspired because I saw people achieving really great things naturally. And it just gave me even more confidence to kind of stay natural. And then I competed the following year in 2018. This was my first show. This was my first prep with Jeff. We had been working for about 8 months leading up to this show. I won the overall, which was crazy to me. That being said, natural bodybuilding at this time was still really small. There were two people in my weight class. So although it sounds really cool, it wasn't a huge competition. The overall, there's quite a long lineup in the overall. When we stood in the overall lineup, that was when it felt like a competition to me. I got second, but after the drug testing was done, the first place winner got disqualified for using performance enhancing drugs. Everyone moved up a spot. I got called the following year to collect my first place trophy, which at that time, I would say I was honored, still in disbelief that I achieved that because I've always admired other people, like all of the people who I met in university who competed before me, I still idolize them. And even to this day, I still do that. So after that 2018 competition, I, like most rookie competitors, I would say, had to spend a lot of time recovering mentally and physically from that show, more so mentally, because um, it was really tough to push myself to that level of conditioning, which, by the way, for this day and age, that level of conditioning would have done terribly. Like I barely got glutes at that point. But for that time, it was enough to get an overall win because shredded glutes were not commonplace. I was thinking between 2018 and this competition season, I was thinking to myself, I want to compete. I wasn't entirely sure when, especially because of coronavirus and everything, but I knew that I wanted to compete. My colleague competed in INBA last year, and I went to support him, and I saw the physiques, and I was thinking to myself, holy cow, everyone looks so good. Like, how can I stand on stage next to that? Like, again, I was really inspired, really nervous because I was thinking I do still want to compete, and how am I going to be competitive amongst people like this? I just bit the bullet and I started a prep at the beginning of 2024. I started prep on 5th of February, and it was a 37-week prep to WNBF Singapore. And after prepping for that and stepping on that stage, I still remember my attitude going into that show was I don't think I'm gonna do so well because again, I kind of idolize everybody else. I'm just gonna step on stage and see what happens. And it turned out far better than I could have hoped. In fact, I started hearing so many good positive things, which gave me a lot of confidence. So I was really pleased with that showing. And although I kind of came in feeling like I wouldn't really accomplish very much, I I was very encouraged by that experience. And then I went into Worlds with a little bit more confidence, but still mostly feeling like it was going to be more so me just trying to not seem so out of place. That was my thoughts, especially because Worlds is the pinnacle of natural bodybuilding, although I was going in the amateurs division. And to my surprise, I managed to win my weight class and I managed to win second in the overall, which really was, to me, better than I could have ever hoped. And I went into the pro show the next day thinking this is an incredibly rare opportunity because you have to qualify to compete as a pro at Worlds. This was the first year that WNBF changed the rules to where you can also qualify to compete in WNBF Worlds Pro Division if you get your pro card the day prior at Worlds Amateur. So I thought it was a rare opportunity and I jumped on it. And I stood on that stage with a very different feeling. It was probably uh, the least stressful ever because I knew there was zero chance I was going to win. And at the same time, it was such a surreal experience backstage to see all these awesome mythical champions that I would only see in Instagram or see articles about or even hear about on podcasts. And there they are in the flesh, just like right in front of me. And I'm trying to not look so out of place, but stood on that stage and I had like the best seat in the house to see them. I saw them up close. And when I came back, people were asking me, how did this person look? How did that person look? And it's just so surreal. And it's really hard for me to still accept how things have turned out because when I started lifting 14 years ago, I would never have dreamed or imagined that I would have achieved what I did today. Like getting all this, um, getting rewarded for my hard work is not something I did it for, but it's like uh, it's nice to kind of appreciate and celebrate all the hard work that I put in. So I guess that's a really long-winded answer of to answer your question is
Yeah,
yeah.
Fides, excuse me to cut you off. That's a that although it's a long answer, but it's really great, like to hear you go through the journey. But if you were to summarize that in a shorter, like two sentence, what would you say about your first season and then your recent season? What would you say about it?
My first competition season versus my most recent season. I would say that my most recent season was far more fulfilling for two reasons. Number one, it really helped me feel like I got my systems right. Whereas in the first season, I was really like learning everything for the first time. So I felt more confident in my second season. And secondly, I think the second season was really eye-opening because I saw what natural bodybuilders are capable of. So in my first season, I competed in a very small show, and yeah, there were good physiques, but I wasn't entirely inspired. Whereas this one, I was on stage with world champions in the entire world, and the physiques just blew my mind. So very, very, very inspired.
Right, for that was, if you don't mind me asking, we all know that, when it come to getting that kind of peak condition, we have to sacrifice, we have to suffer, right? So comparing your first competitive season versus recent, how are the sacrifices difference or the suffers difference, like in terms of your intake? What, or maybe a lot more cardio or the kind of thing? Maybe you want to share with the audience.
All right, that's a good question, and I'll just say from the very beginning that there were competent competitors who were far more shredded than I was. I think in terms of conditioning, I was just kind of satisfactory, but that's certainly a place I need to improve. But I would say that my glutes were boxed in and they were there, but they weren't shredded and peeled like some other competitors. But that being said, I did have to obviously diet hard to get there. So my prep for WNBF Singapore was 37 weeks, and then I dieted another month for World. So 41 weeks in total. It didn't go according to plan, not even close. I did the first half of my prep really well, and then I had to battle lots of binge eating. Like it's a really serious issue, and prep will bring out like the worst issues in you. So if you've not sorted that out in the off season, is really hard to sort out in prep. And I was on a strict timeline. I was stressed. I was anxious. And I didn't really know how to overcome this binge eating. Fortunately for me, I had a lot of support. So my partner, my girlfriend Shani, who, if anyone watches the videos, you'll hear this girl screaming, "Come on, furry!" That's my girlfriend Shani.
Right.
Um, and she was really helpful for me to stick to my diet in terms of psychologically. She helped me to kind of process, you know, try and help to discover the root of why I'm binging, try and come up with strategies to mentally overcome that issue and not binge. And, thirdly, she physically takes the food away from me because we stay together. Yeah, it sounds funny, but at night, sometimes she comes, sometimes I walk into the room and she's like, "Are you supposed to have that?" And if there's any hesitation at all, she just like takes the food away from me and she really physically takes the food away from me. So yeah, she was really helpful. Um, yeah. So I would say that I still haven't mastered getting that peeled condition myself, but that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to mastering the next season because through all the discussion with Shani, um, I have a much, much, much better idea of how I'm going to tackle that from the beginning and not let that become a big issue um, for the next season. And I'm confident that I can bring a better, more lean package.
I think I can totally resonate with what you call binge eating during a prep. So I myself I was a sufferer. I've been through that. So I was supposed to compete like twice, right? But both with the same issue of 7 and 11 weeks I'll binge eat. So I
Mm,
withdraw back. And I realized that right after the last so-called prep, I went into
mm,
a good off season. You can ask him, even when we fly, we track macros, that kind of thing. Right.
Right.
And recently I just did a 30-day cut and it was like super aggressive. It's like 1,002 kind. Right. And I have zero binge eating disorder. None.
Mm.
okay.
Right. It shows that, prior to your prep or pre-prep diet, when you actually do your off season well, you're gonna gain during the prep. And I believe that you did it once, twice, the third, the fourth are gonna get even
Mm,
better. Right. Even Sim himself, when he prepped for show, he also binge eat a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I
Yeah.
mean, we all heard crazy stories about people binge eating. I never had like a crazy binge, like a 8,000 calories binge, but I still binge. It's smaller binge, but it happens quite frequently, like a couple of times
mm,
when it's closer to show days. And I think whatever Edmund and Firdauz, whatever you guys said is right.
mm,
If you don't fix it in your off season, it's only gonna get worse in
mm,
when it's closer to your show day, right?
mm,
I mean that that shows a lot of youngsters. I think we can safely say that there are great youngsters out there, but it shows that great to the youngsters that take your time, do the groundwork, build the foundation, and then you can go from there. I have
mm,
one question when Fitus was sharing about his first season and comparing to the recent season. You said in your first show, the Singaporean show, you won the overall, but then in your class there was only two athletes, right?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I want to ask, in your very own opinion, how has natural bodybuilding progressed from your first show until your most recent show in Singapore, let's say? So, because it's comparable, right? I mean, 10 years difference?
My first show was in 2018. My most this recent show is 2024, so 6 years different.
6 years difference. How has
Yeah,
it progressed
Evolve.
in
Yeah.
your opinion? Yeah.
so much. So first of all, if we look at numbers, so there were two people in the weight class in my first show, and there was nine people in my weight class in this most recent show. It was a stacked class, and it was super exciting, loads of people came to support me, and loads of them were not fans of bodybuilding. In fact, my girlfriend Shani, she's not a bodybuilding fan. She only came to support me, but post show she was excitedly sharing with me about, all the different physiques. And I think it's such a exciting competition that anyone can appreciate it. You don't have to be a natural bodybuilding fan. And that's consistently the feedback I got from people who spectated. They found it so exciting. That was just my weight class. Close to all the weight classes looked like that. I know the heavyweight class was, I think, just three people, but even then, that was exciting in its own right. I think the heaviest competitor was in that weight class. I think it was a giant, but so much more competitors, which also means that you see all these different talented individuals. So you see lots and lots and lots of great physiques. Whereas in the previous competitions, when there's not so many people competing, sometimes the winners can look uh, not the best, like not what you would expect a bodybuilding champion to look like. Whereas here, all the champions of every weight class, they were without a doubt champion worthy physique. That's number one. Number two, the production value. WNBF Singapore set up an amazing show, very entertaining with guest posers, very well run. So, Sim, you are backstage running around with your headset, making sure everything's super smooth. My first competition, I had no idea what was going on, and all of a sudden I'm called on stage, and even then it's really haphazard. We're getting off stage in the wrong way, and then we have to go back on stage and go out the other way. Nothing like that happened here at WNBF Singapore, so really well run. Um, on top of that, I think it's a very international presence. So in my weight class, I remember the top five were from all different countries. So there was me from Singapore, second place was from Hong Kong, uh, there was someone from South Korea, someone from the UK, someone from France. That was the top five in my weight class. And yeah, there's just so many people from so many different countries. And when I was backstage talking to these folks, um, it's really eye-opening to see how far natural bodybuilding stretches in terms of its international presence. Whereas back in 2018, I met two guys from Taiwan who I met again at Worlds. And yeah, I met, yeah, just not as far reaching. So I didn't really have an idea of how far reaching natural bodybuilding was. So I get an idea of being part of something special now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I I want to say thank you for the compliment, but I want to give the credit to Edmund and the whole team running the show because it wouldn't have been possible if any one of us is absent, right?
Mm.
Um, would you say that other than because obviously when you have a bigger pool of athletes, the standard is going to be higher, but would you say that despite the bigger pool, the standard, nonetheless, the standard of athletes has improved over the years in natural
Yes,
bodybuilding?
absolutely. So the level of conditioning that I brought this year was better than what I brought in 2018. And in 2018, that competition, objectively speaking, I was the leanest. Even though like I said, my glutes weren't shredded. This time around, I was leaner than that, but still, I wasn't the most lean. I was probably like middle of the pack when it comes to conditioning. And I think what gave me the edge was muscularity, the size, and symmetry. Um, but just the level of conditioning you see nowadays, like shredded glutes, is pretty much a must. If you want to be in contention to do well, you need shredded glutes. You need to be peeled. You need to have, good muscle development. So you must be training for, I'd say, at least a good like 5 to 6 years to be able to stand the chance and look like you belong on stage. Um, yeah, and I wouldn't have said the same for like 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I saw people standing on stage, soft, many people soft, and muscularity not so impressive. Of course, the winners generally are are better, but like I said before, not all the winners necessarily had what I thought was championship physique. Not knocking any of them, but it's just different. It's just different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to give props to WNBF Malaysia first, right? Sim, Edward, and the team, right? Because without them, right, actually, WNBF Singapore wouldn't happen. To be honest, I was like, going back and forth. Why am I doing this kind of thing? Because I'm always all alone, I'm always isolated. But having Sim and his team is like, pushing me forward and giving me a lot of ideas, flying around, the kind of thing, giving me advices. That is why the things happened in Singapore and got a little bit better because we fly around for a reason, not just for judging, but we witnesses all events and how are we going to evolve it in our homeland, right? That is
Yeah.
why the first episode was something crazy and something that we can celebrate that, hey, we have done it and we did it well, right? So
Yeah.
we
Mm.
also have a champion mate, I can't imagine that if the show didn't run this year, well, when will the next WNBF Pro be born?
Mm.
Yeah.
When will it ever happen? Right. So I'm very grateful for Seaman team, yourself, everyone that competed in WNBF Singapore, and I also want to give myself a pat that actually did something.
You
Right.
deserve it, man. You deserve it.
You
Self-praise.
do.
Well,
Yes,
I
thank you
mean,
so much.
moving into that topic of WNBF on the rise in the region that we are all in, Malaysia, Singapore, Southeast Asia. I noticed that this season you only competed two times, Firdaus. So it's the WNBF Singapore Natural Elite Showdown back in October 2024, and also WNBF World in Boston 2024. Um, what is what have you seen the difference between WNBF and all the other federations, and what makes you only competed in WNBF this season?
Okay, so in terms of the federations that I've competed in, is just NBFA, which was in 2018, and that federation has shut down in 2020, and now WNBF. And the reason I competed in WNBF is because it's known to be the most robust in drug testing. They are truly, genuinely trying to weed out people who are trying to cheat and uh, compete while being on enhancing drugs, and kind of get an easy win and cheat hardworking natural athletes of what they deserve. There are other natural federations, which I've heard a lot of other peers competing in, ICN, INBA. I personally didn't choose to compete in them because I hear that there can be some dubious things going on with the drug testing. I have no evidence. I haven't seen it myself, but I don't want to take a chance. I don't want to go through a 40-week prep just to be just to compete and feel cheated. Uh, Whereas WNBF, I didn't feel that at all. I felt like I had faith in all of the athletes being truly natural because of how stringent the drug testing is. There's urine testing, there's polygraph testing, there's off-season testing. Yeah, it's just the most robust drug testing of any federation. Um, and why not any other WNBF competition? Singapore being on the home ground, on my home ground, is really convenient. And then Worlds was something that just felt like something epic, just like the pinnacle of natural bodybuilding. So I wanted to go for that. I have many peers who competed in nearby WNBF shows. WNBF Philippines was shortly after Singapore. Personally, I was kind of just trying to keep my reserves for Worlds because, like I mentioned earlier, with my binge eating, it's still a struggle, especially at that point. Like when the first show is over, a lot of athletes that you see, uh, they make it look really easy. And it was an eye-opening experience for me because it wasn't easy. Like the first hurdle is over, and it's hard to just get back into the grind again and just keep working for the next show. Like I kind of celebrated a bit after the first show, and that celebration, it was hard to kind of switch out of that mindset, you know. Um, I was halfway wanting to even quit my prep for Worlds, thinking, oh, like I'm starving here, like can't wait to eat. But yeah, so doing multiple shows, it sounds easy, and a lot of athletes make it look easy, but for me, two shows were pretty hard to do already. Like in 2018, when I just did one show, it's pretty clear cut where once the show's over, you can relax. Whereas this one, when you have multiple shows in a season, you can't relax, and it's hard to not relax when a show's over and everyone's congratulating you, and there's this feeling that, you know, the feeling's different, and so it's hard to go back to the grind. But that being said, for the next season, I am planning to do multiple shows. I want to qualify for World's Professional Division, and so I'll need to do a pro show prior to that, and yeah, see what my coach and I think is a good um, way to string some shows together for the next season in 2026 or later. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Okay. So some of the prep question that I'm kind of curious, right? So in terms of like, training approaches, these days there's a lot of scientific approaches and all. What are your take on it? Like is there anything changed, or just the train hard to failure, that's all you do? And volume per se kind of thing. Would you like to share a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I started working with Jeff in 2017. So we've been working together now for 7 years, and we went through two preps and one extremely long off season. And what I noticed is uh, I made a few changes. So number one is my volume over time on paper has gone down, and that's because
Mm,
I've actually become a lot more proficient with the movements, able to stimulate the muscle better with
mm,
less. And so I think I was doing a lot of junk volume in the beginning, which was
mhm,
redundant, which I've kind of like been able to make my workouts more efficient, more highly stimulating without building as much fatigue. So my training volume for this prep was really low, and loads of people were surprised to hear how little I was training, but it felt like a lot to me because it's hard to recover from. Is really balancing supply and demand, and I felt like they were like perfectly matched for the most
mm,
part throughout the prep. Another thing that I did over the course of my big picture training career is I thought out more high stimulus to fatigue ratio movements. So I came from a powerlifting background. I wasn't a competitive powerlifter, but I came from a gym where people squatted, barbell squat, barbell deadlifted, and barbell bench press, like the big three. And that's how I was introduced to lifting by my uncle as well. So I had to incorporate the big three. And on top of that, I was doing like bent over rows, overhead press, so many movements that generate so much fatigue
mhm,
without like super targeted stimulus. Uh, and part of the reason why I stuck with that for so long is because at first I was seeing great success with it. I was progressing so much, building a great physique. But I guess as you're trying to progress from the intermediate level to the advanced level, you need to really fine tune the processes. And to kind of put me to that next level, I had to um, optimize my training that way as well, so that I wasn't accruing too much fatigue. And I did find that for this past uh, prep, um, it was probably, like I said, I felt like the supply and demand was far better matched. In the previous prep, I was getting injured quite a few times, even over the course of the prep, lower back injuries, elbow injuries, and I have a feeling it's because I was trying to continue doing these super fatiguing movements, bench press, squats and deadlifts for my lower back. And this time around, I was a lot more efficient with my training. Yeah. I've also explored other things. So the off season is great to explore other techniques. I was looking at cluster sets, which are myo reps. So for people who don't know, myo reps and cluster sets are when you condense your working sets into one set. And instead of doing them in a straight sets fashion where you do a set and you rest for like 3 minutes or until you're fully recovered and you go again, you do a set, you rest for like 5 breaths, and then you go again, and that simulates like the last few reps of the next set. Super time efficient. Um, but I like the fact that I was able to experiment with these because a lot of people know of these techniques and they say, oh, yeah, you can use this technique. Yeah, no problem. But for me, I know what the pitfalls are. So I personally hate my reps because A, they're super painful, and B, they're also really fatiguing. So it's hard to kind of keep in the program long term. But yeah, I'm glad that over the course of my off season, I got to explore myo reps, back off sets, high intensity training, high volume training. And I guess the off season is when you want to explore these things because you've got a lot of food coming in, so you can recover. And then when you're in prep mode, you want to kind of have already sorted these things out. So once I started prep on 5th of February, I had a solid training program that I knew was tried, tested, and proven. And all I had to do was stay consistent on it. And yeah, this prep kind of proved to me that me and Jeff, we created a really robust, effective training program.
So through your prep, are you still progressing on your leave, or things that start to go down a little bit?
That's a good question. So, throughout the course of my uh, career as a competitive natural bodybuilder, I've always heard that your lifts are going to go down. When you're prepping for a show, when you're dieting, your training is just going to be a desperate attempt to hang on to whatever muscle you have and whatever performance you have. But this prep, interestingly enough, it wasn't the case. My previous prep, yes, it was. I was struggling to hang on to the strength, which was inevitably dwindling. But this prep, I was progressing on all my lists for the majority of the prep, even towards the end, which was pretty crazy. Like everyone around me, because uh, I had a colleague who was also competing. His name's CX. He competed in the same weight class as me. I mean, he was just like super jealous. Like, what the hell are you doing? You know, what's going on? But yeah, I don't know if it's my genetics or whatnot, but it's just how this prep turned out. I have a feeling it's something to do with my program as well, like how I structured my training and my diet, because my first prep, my strength did dwindle. So something I did differently helped this time around. I suspect it's the higher stimulus to fatigue ratio movements
Mhm.
and the lower volume and the higher proficiency, more
Mm.
stimulus, that's fatigue. I have a feeling it's that. But I guess I'm gonna have to go another round to really validate that.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Is your sleep are you sleeping better this season compared to the previous season? Because I was thinking maybe recovery could be a factor of you progressing on your lift this time around.
Very, very good point. So I didn't think of that, but you're absolutely right. I was sleeping a lot better this prep compared to the last prep. In fact, the last prep, like I told you, my systems weren't really I wasn't super clear on what was important in my systems. I think back then, all I thought was important was maintaining my lifts, my lifting performance, my training performance, and my diet, so long as I was adhering to my diet. This time round, I placed same emphasis on both those things, but I also placed an equal emphasis on getting sufficient sleep, so 7 hours a night, and clocking in my steps, so keeping my expenditure fairly high. And I think, Edmund, you asked quite a while back about cardio, and I didn't do any cardio this prep. I just relied on steps, which I think is also another good thing because I was able to expend that energy, which is the goal of cardio for a bodybuilder, but without building unnecessary fatigue, which a cardio session would probably do. Um, so wait, what was your question again?
I
The
think that
sleep, right?
yeah.
So yeah, I did sleep far better this prep, and I think you're right. Like that definitely played a part as well.
Hmm. Cool. So I know throughout our conversation you mentioned a little bit about you do want to compete again, and do you have any more plans that you can tell the audience about your next goal? You mentioned that you want to compete again in maybe 2026. Is
Hmm.
that a conversation that you have had with your coach already? Is that already written in the books?
Good question. So it's my goal that I want to compete in 2026 again. It's not something that I've had a formal discussion with my coach just yet because he told me to enjoy the post competition period. Like, take a moment to smell the roses and not be so quick to jump onto the next goal and get back to work necessarily. Something I love about 3DMJ, which is they're very balanced.
Mm,
They encourage you to live life and be a good bodybuilder at the same time. Don't be a good bodybuilder at the expense of living life well. Um, and so it's not something that we've had a formal conversation yet, but my goal is to compete again in 2026 in uh, in the international pro competitions. So I was having a look at what um, competitions in WNBF have a pro division, and I think on the international side, there's about six-ish shows. So I saw Taiwan, which I'm definitely keen to try.
mhm.
Dubai, which I'm also kind of on the fence about, but I do think in 2026, if I can string three shows together, I would like to try Taiwan, Dubai, and Worlds.
And also
Um,
Malaysia.
oh, does Malaysia also have a pro division?
Yeah,
I mean, by the
it
time you
will come.
compete, it will come, right?
It will be there.
Ah, that would be amazing. Yeah, closer to home. Yeah, that would be amazing. Get to see you and Edward as well, which is really cool. In fact, one of my fondest memories of WNBF Worlds is when I saw you and Edward and Zach and Grant in the hotel lobby as we were getting ready to go for the athletes briefing. I think it was the day before actually, and it
Yeah.
was one of my favorite moments because one of the magical parts of competing is you get to meet these amazing, like-minded people who become friends. And I remember when you were there, you were like so excited to see me, and so was Edward. Like, you both gave me like a great big hug, and you were like, "Oh, I came here just to see you. Like, can't believe you're competing." Like, it just feels so welcoming, and I feel like that's one of the things I love about this sport. Like it's a sport where we all support one another and are really encouraging. I'm not sure how it's like in the non-tested federation, but I hear it's a little bit more competitive and people are a lot more on edge with one another. But with natural bodybuilding, I just feel like it's super welcoming. We love the community, maybe because it's also a lot smaller. Like when you see another natural bodybuilder, just feel like there's a bond already because you both are pursuing same shared um, aspiration. But yeah, that was certainly one of my favorite moments. So if I could compete in WNBF Malaysia as a pro, like if there's a pro division by then, that would be amazing. So I get to see lots of good friends again.
We we look forward to host you, man. Whichever
Thanks.
year it is, whichever year it is. I I have one quick thing to share. I think Edmund is ready to ask the next question, but I have one thing to share because it just came to my mind. You mentioned about you're not sure about how the non-tested competitions are, like backstage, the athletes are more on edge. I've heard that stories too. I've heard that stories multiple times regarding multiple different non-tested shows in Malaysia. But I was quite lucky. My first ever show was non-tested. I was studying in the UK, and I did this very, very small show that is newly implemented in the region in a very small town. And it was my first time. I met everyone backstage. I'm not sure if they were natural or not, but they were all really nice. And because I was in the UK, I only brought two friends to help me out. And then, so only two of my friends are in the audience. And I went on stage. It was during the solo routine. They did the solo routine first. And I was so surprised that I stepped on stage, I stepped into the spotlight, everybody in the room cheered. So
Wow.
I guess if that wasn't my first competition experience, maybe I wouldn't be here today. But I'm not sure how that speaks for the culture or the about anything, but just one thing to share. Like it's
Yeah.
quite a nice experience, and everything else afterwards was um all tested federation. I did 3 shows in 2022. All of them were WNBF. I spent a fortune competing, flying around. But yeah, good experience with all the apps. I think you said it very well. We are all pursuing the same goal, and we are all in the same journey, individual but same journey towards the same goal. So that is something that is very special that we all share. I do appreciate that.
Thanks for sharing that because, like
Yeah,
I said, I've just heard mainly stories about how, the non-tested competitions are, less welcoming. But
hmm
this is a good eye-opening story to me to where it's not necessarily like that. I'm happy to
yeah,
know that you had a good first experience because you're an amazing athlete, and I would have hated it like your first experience to kind of throw you off track and make you not want to compete in the sport.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm just fortunate.
I think that's also something WNBF Singapore did really well this year that I noticed is different from 2018 NBFA. 2018 NBFA, there was no novice class. Um, I think everyone was kind of just lumped in the opens. And there was also like uh yeah, it was really tough to kind of get rewarded. And so I think a lot of people kind of may have walked away from that competition, not necessarily having a good experience. Whereas in WNBF Singapore, there was that novice class where first-time competitors had their time to shine. And yeah, I think loads of people walked away from that experience on a positive note. I know I spoke to quite a few competitors, one of whom was from Malaysia. And I think, Sim, I saw him on a recent story because you and Edward had some sort of seminar with regards to contest prep. And I saw him in one of the shots in the reel. And I was really happy to see him because he didn't necessarily do so well on paper in WNBF Singapore. I don't think he placed.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that he stuck with it because I think he still had a positive experience enough to want to do it again. And yeah, I think that this competition was great at getting people interested in this sport.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. I just forgot his name.
Same, same. But yeah, he competed in Singapore first. He came with his girlfriend. I think his name begins with a K. I can't remember exactly. And then yeah, I saw him in your reel. Yeah.
hmm Edmund, you have another question to ask? Our fellow world champion.
Mm, I will leave it to DMs. I will drop you a DM. Yeah.
All right, cool,
Whenever.
cool, cool, cool. Before I think we're coming to the end of the podcast, but before we wrap this up, I have one question because most of my friends around me, they don't work with a coach for the longest time. Myself included. I mostly work with 3DMJ coaches. My first season, I
Mm,
did my first off season and competitive season. I did it with Alberto Nunez from 3DMJ,
mm.
and in 2022, I did my season and also the off season with Brett Loomis. How is it like working with one coach for 7 years? Like, and would you advise someone who are perhaps they just got a coach or they are looking to have a coach, would you advise them to, spend more time with a specific coach and would that be beneficial?
That's a good question. So I've started and stuck with Jeff for 7 years for a good reason, and I'm super happy to be part of 3DMJ. As you can see, I'm repping,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
thing.
repping
All
this,
right, all
yeah,
right.
proud member of Team 3DMJ. And I stuck with him for so long because he's a wealth of information and experience that I've really found valuable. So to answer your question, if you find the right coach that's going to provide tons of value in terms of knowledge and experience and how they keep you accountable, yes, sticking with the same coach over the long haul is going to help because as coaches, they're going to have lots of tools and understand the principles, but what tools are applicable to a certain individual athlete is going to vary. And so they're not necessarily going to know right off the bat. So if they just do one prep with you, I don't think it's necessarily going to be perfect, but the next prep, they'll sort of know what works and what doesn't with you. That's what my experience was. Like my coach knew what my pitfalls were. Like he knew that I was a binge eater and he knew that I have great symmetry, but I really got to work on my conditioning. So he kept me accountable. He knew how to help me with my particular struggles. That being said, if you have a coach that doesn't really provide value, find a better coach. And there are loads of good coaches out there, like Team 3DMJ. It's a team of great coaches, like you mentioned, Alberto Nunez, Brad Loomis. Lots of other competitors that I met at WNBF Singapore are coached by 3DMJ now as well. So coached by Brian Miner. I'm coached by Jeff Alberts. There was another athlete in that show who was coached by Jeff Alberts as well. Um, and
The lady, right?
yeah,
Lisa.
Lisa. Yes, you're right, Lisa. There's also AJ Morris, who's pretty commonly known in the UK, and I think the winner is coached by AJ Morris.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think there were a few other athletes who were coached by AJ Morris. If I'm not wrong, Edmund, you were also coached by AJ Morris back in the day, were you?
Back then, yeah, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, so also a good coach. Then there's also Cliff Wilson. Oh, something I might also add. Lots of these different coaches seem to have a particular specialty. So 3DMJ is great at practical bodybuilding, balance, that sort of thing. AJ Morris, okay, maybe Cliff Wilson, known for peaking. So he peaks his athletes with really like good peaks. Um, AJ Morris, I'm not too sure. I'm not super familiar, but from what I see on Instagram, he's a really intense dude. He's like the JP of natural bodybuilding. Then there's Dirk Emmerich, who I think Edmund you were coached by most recently. Dirk is actually a client of Alberto, so I think he's still part of Team 3DMJ. Which goes to show that even as a coach, it's worth having a coach. Everyone could use a coach because even if you have the tools and the knowledge, it helps to have an extra set of eyes because when you are an athlete, it's hard to be objective sometimes. And on top of that, it's always helpful to have someone to hold you accountable. So I would highly recommend anyone to hire a coach. There are some people who are able to do it very well without a coach. So Grant is self-coached, Grant Tang, and he's been consistently placing top five in the world for the past few years. Um, but I think he'll also tell you that he has to be really careful with how he does things. And that's why he does so many shows to like test out many different peaks. Um, yeah, so if you're self-coached, you really need to know what you're doing and you really need to try out a lot of different things yourself. Yeah. Shameless plug though. I would highly recommend Team 3DMJ because yeah, I couldn't be happier with my experience with them. 7 years and counting. Also, Admin's the coach too. So if you're looking for coach, Admin's the coach. He can help you
No, no,
become
no.
the
I'm
next
good enough.
pro.
Steve is also a coach.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay.
I think for me right now it's like I just put myself forefront first and all the events and whatever plans that
Mm,
have in 2025. Right? Because right now I'm like self-coaching. The reason being is that I want to experience everything firsthand. I want to know how, what, because at the end of the day, the three of us, we know the fundamental, right?
mhm,
We want to get some fat gone. It's all about the deficit. We want to program. We can manipulate, and that's the fun thing about this. When you coach yourself, you can manipulate the stuff. And when I really want to prep for a show, then yes, perhaps like what you say, we need another eye. Then that's
mhm,
when a coach comes in. Other than that, I really say that once you have all the fundamental, once you I start to understand the whole bodybuilding thing in the bigger picture, you are able to manipulate a lot of things according to your needs. Because most of the time, what we heard is, I have this plan cater for you, but at the end of the day, you will know what's better for you. Does that make sense? Right? Because
yes.
the rest of the thing are very baseline. You want to lose weight, deficit, you want to gain weight, surplus, you want to maintain weight, just maintain. Right. So I think that's the whole true beauty about bodybuilding. Then you will start to discover, so this thing suits me, that thing suits me better. Right. Then I think that through all this experience, then you will eventually, if you want to go into the coaching line, then you will become a better coach. I'm talking about coaching the athlete,
Mm,
right?
Yeah.
So you will know firsthand what is really good, right? Because you've seen really good coaches are coaches themselves,
mhm,
that they coach themselves, right? Some of the big names, AJ, he coached himself,
mhm,
Nunez coached himself, right? So yeah, so these are the really leading example, right? We can't deny that world champion professional athletes, right? They won show and all because it's not that I'm not as hardworking as them or you are not as hardworking as him, right? But the fact is that he got better genetic,
Yeah.
better
mhm,
structure, right? We both work harder, or you might even work harder than them, but you just can't win the show, right? It's not because he have the best coach, because the coach gave him the best recipe. It's just because I don't have that.
mhm.
This is bodybuilding.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that's
Well,
probably one of the lesser talked about topics where like genetics play a part. So your symmetry is really heavily dictated by your genetics. Where your muscles insert is not something you can decide. And
exactly.
so, yeah, when some people are just born to be bodybuilders, but what we can do, and the perspective that I've had, which has got me this far, is we can really have a good physique by maximizing our genetics, and whether that's worthy to be, a champion bodybuilder, you never really know until you compete. So I still would highly encourage anyone who's interested in competing to compete. More often than not, I think you're probably going to surprise yourself at how good you are rather than a lot of people who think that they're probably not good. You never really know until you try. Uh, but yeah, genetics really play a part, not just in the shape of the muscle, but also how someone responds to training. So there are these high responders like the Ronnie Colemans of the natural world, where they do one workout and you can do the exact same workout, but they're going to get a higher muscle protein synthesis response from that, and they're going to grow more from the same workout. So, they're just these phenoms that are born to be bodybuilders. Yeah.
Exactly. That's very well said. Well, I want to thank Firdauz, the amateur world champion in your weight class,
Thank
for
you.
spending your lovely Saturday night with us. We are
Thank
recording
you.
this at a Saturday night. Um, before we go, how about we have the world champion to send one final sentence to young people, um, beginners, or even people who just thought about competing next year. What is the best line that you can give to these people?
So I've actually had people who come up to me and tell me that they want to compete and they're excited. And the one thing I would say to them is I would encourage them to do it because this is an endeavor that, gives you health, it gives you discipline, gives you happiness, something that's really fulfilling and is really tough, but you discover a lot about yourself through this process. And that's going to be something that's even more valuable than the trophy that you take away from that experience, and you're going to be a stronger person because of it. So go for it.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Firdauz. Thank you so much.
Thank you too for your time also on a Saturday night. Thank you so much.
Yep. So on a closing note, I want to thank every audience for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like whatever we are doing. You can show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. And we cannot wait to bring you the next episode. So if you have anyone in mind that you would like us to invite to the Natty Society podcast, feel free to let us know in our Instagram and also comment down below. Until the next one, we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye bye.